All right, so then, okay, so now let me put this screen, put this homework 4 to this screen. Okay, so I'm going to put this up here so we can reference to that. Okay. The screen is a little bit smaller than I wish to have. All right, so now let me open up a whiteboard to start work on that. So let me create a new. So let's just say this is whiteboard. Okay. All right, so now let's read the question, hands-on question of store cells, raw materials, as well as components that are made of other components, and then and other raw materials too. And wants to have a database to keep records of his customers and orders. So based on the first sentence, we can pretty much get all the objects we need, right? So we will have, say, customer. Okay, just throw a couple of attributes, say customer ID, customer name. Okay, let's just put it to there. And then you have orders. So let's just say we have order ID, order date. Okay, and let's just say that is required, and maybe amount. That is optional. And then we have raw materials and components. So I will put components in here. So component, just like a part, right? So we get like a part ID, part number, and then description. Okay, and that's just say optional. There may be some other things like a price, color, all that. So I'm going to just put a price here. Optional. Okay. And also you're going to have raw materials. So raw materials, it's getting so small here. Why? Can I move this aside? That makes okay. So the raw material will have some kind of ID too. Let's just make up something here. So raw material ID. Okay, and then maybe also have a description. Okay, that's just optional. And then what else? I think those are the major components, right? Customers, orders, components, or raw materials. And then we need to read on, and then they see whether there's anything else we need to add. A component can be used to make any other several components. So basically, we are going to have some kind of like a recursive relationship between components and components. So that will be always optional to optional because it is recursive. Okay. And then let's just read the first sentence again, part 1 again. So basically, a component can be used to make any of several other components. So that means on the one side should be many. So suppose this is raw material, this is other things that are made of. So let's say that is many here. And then part 2, a component can be made of several other components too. So that means that the relationship should many to many here. Okay. And then the component a component can be constructed from several raw materials. All right, so now we have a relationship between component and the raw materials. Okay, let's just make it solid first. So one component may be made of several other raw materials. Okay. And then a raw material can be used to make several other components. So now the relationship is again many to many. Okay, so if you have any questions, just stop me, okay? So otherwise, I'm going to move on. And then number 5, each component is produced by a single worker. So now we introduce another component here, another object here. So let me move it here. So that would be employee or worker. So through, say, worker ID, employee ID, and then employee name, maybe job. Okay. So each component is made of single worker. So that means given component, the worker size is 1, the cardinality. On the other hand, one worker can produce many kinds of components. So again, we are going to have many sites here. Okay. All right. And then number 7, a component may need a certain quantity of other raw materials or other components and raw materials. So we have a question about quantity. Now, how do we put the quantity? Of course, we're going to use the Jurand. So basically, a component may use other components, and the component can be made of other raw materials. So now we have to have quantity. So how do we do that? So we're going to get rid of these two relationships and make them to be like a Jurand, associative entities. So I'm going to erase that. Question? Anybody? So I'm going to get rid of that first, and then I'm going to create a Jurand for component and between component and raw materials. So that will be like this. Okay, like that. Okay, so then this is, we can have quantity in Ty. Okay, so we can have a name here. So maybe this is comp raw, something like a comp raw material line. And then do the same thing. We need a quantity for component. So one component can be using another component of different quantities. So we will need to create Jurand for that too. So let's do that. And we need a quantity here. So now this is okay. And then this is associative entity. And then this side should be dashed because a component may or may not be used. So basically, we need to use that dash line. Okay. Okay, that's it. All right, and then what else? Component may need a certain quantity of other components and raw materials. So another quantity will be captured by these two associative entities here. So maybe this is called comp. Okay, comp line. Okay. And then let's continue. Okay, that's number 8. Number 8. There are two kinds of raw materials, perishables, that have definite expiration time and desirable storage temperature, and non-perishable that does not have expiration time and storage time. So basically, we are going to expand raw material. So I'm going to expand this one to add perishables inside. Okay, so let's just put a small box inside, and let's call that a perishable. Okay, so let's just put say expiration expire date. Okay, expiration date. Okay, now let me just. I think there's also like a temperature, storage temperature. So let's add that here also. Okay, let's say temperature. Okay, so those are two optional attributes for that. Two kinds of raw material, perishable ones and non-perishable ones. So that does not say what's special with non-perishable ones. I think generally everything else should be non-perishable ones. For any other raw material, they just non-perishable ones, but only perishable ones, you have these special attributes. So in this case, you have a choice. You can create another one called non-perishable, but I don't think that is really necessary in this case. So you can have just in a bigger group, and then just put one small group inside, which is perishable ones here. Okay, this is perishable. All right, and then finally, customers may purchase multiple quantity of some components or raw materials. So now we have a relationship between orders and the component here. Between order and the component, so that is typically many-to-many relationship. Between order and the raw material, that is also a many-to-many relationship. But this last statement is saying that you may have multiple quantities. So again, we need to use gerund for that. Okay, so let's just say this is order line, order material. It's kind of my pen is kind of like so thick. Let me try to make it bigger box, and then I shrink it after that. Okay, so let me try to write better. Okay, so that would be order material, order element. Okay, so then we're going to have order quantity. Just I don't know why the pen is so big. Let's try to make a smaller one. Okay, so let's do it again. So that would be order quantity, much better. Okay. And then we're going to have gerund here. So connect that to here. That would be one-to-many here. And from here to here, the one-to-many here, and also little bar here. Okay. And then we do the same thing for components. So between order and components, you're going to have order quantity too. So let's just say create associative entity. Let's call that order com. Okay. And then we have quantity here. So then that will be gerund also. Okay. So originally without this, then would be just direct relationship between order and the component. That's many-to-many relationship. All right. And finally, customer make orders, of course. So that will be connected, and that should be one-to-many relationship. One customer can make many orders, and one order made by one customer. Okay. And I think let me try to make it smaller, so that you can see the whole screen, whole view in one shot. So this should be the ER diagram for this question.
Professor?
Yeah.
I just had one weak entity to relate order, component, and raw materials. Is that not allowed?
A weak entity, what is weak entity? Weak entity
like an associative entity that was like line item, and it was connected to order, component, and raw materials.
But that is associative entity. That's not a weak entity.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's what I meant.
Oh, that's what you mean. Okay, so that's just this is associative entity. So basically, according to this last sentence, say a customer may purchase multiple quantities of some components or raw materials. So means that the order may have components and also may have raw materials, right? So then for that, so here I create them like a, just generally this will be called like a, create them as two different kinds of products. So you might create just like a super type called products and then put this and that inside the boxes. So in that case, we're going to have a box inside a box too. So we're going to have like a perishables inside raw material also inside the products. Okay, and that is okay. But I'm not that's not really, because I did not explain to you that you can do that. So you don't have to do that. But if you just say order may have components, order may have raw materials, and then you just need to find out how do you reflect that the quantity. The quantity depends on the order, depends on the raw materials. So therefore, it's kind of like a associative entity in the middle.
So you can't combine them because it's two different quantities?
Oh, yeah, that would be two different quantities. How do you make them combined? Let me say, trying to combine. How do you combine? Because you're going to have relationship between order and the component. So then for that relationship, you have a quantity. And then you have relationship between order and the raw materials, and that also have a quantity. So these are two different ones.
Okay.
How do you combine them? So it's just trying to create one to connect all.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Okay. So actually, in that case, it is if you're trying to create something like that. So for example, if I create something like this, okay, and then like that, like that, you're trying to. Okay. So actually, this is a different concept. This is called a multi-way relationship. It is not the same as this one. So the multi-way relationship means that this relationship depends on this, that, and that, all three to exist simultaneously. If anyone withdraws, then this relationship does not exist. So this is a different concept.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions you may have?
Yeah, I actually had a question. So I actually created a weak entity with discount and connected it to order. Would that be acceptable or no?
Discount.
Yeah, I had the discount as a weak entity of order because it relies on the amount of quantity in order to get the discount.
Oh, okay. So in that case, actually, I should have put discount in here. So let me try to maximize that. So if you're trying to say the discount depends on order quantity, then you should have discount in here. And that should be also say this discount depends on the order and also depends on the component, right?
Yeah. So it wouldn't be like the name of the entity itself, would it?
Yeah, the name as entity itself. It will be like Durand. It will be like associative entity, but not weak entity. Weak entity will have difficult to justify. Will be difficult to justify because if you say that is weak entity for orders, that means you have something depends on the order, but not on the products, not on the components. So, for example, if you say, just imagine you have some kind of, say, for each order, you may have multiple different kind of discounts applicable. Okay, so let's say discounts. Okay, and then you have discount amount, right? Discount amount. And then make that as a weak entity. So what does that mean is that this order will have like a multi-valued attributes called the discounts. And then the discounts, it may have multiple different kind of discounts, okay, for the order. So what is possible case is that for each order you have multiple different discounts. I cannot imagine that. Can you imagine what would be the situation that you need that?
Yeah.
One order.
Well, I actually had it reversed, so the discount can be applied. There's only one discount per order, or the discount can be applied to many orders, but there's only one discount per order.
Oh, okay, I see.
That's how I had it.
Okay, so actually in that case, that is called a reference table. So if you have a reference table, so you have like a table for discounts, right? So if this amount you have this discount, this amount you have this discount. So some kind of like a business rule table. So in that case, you don't have to connect that to anyone, because if you're trying to connect this to here, make this as a weak entity, you make order as a weak entity, but order is not a weak. Okay, order does not depend on the discount to exist. Make sense? So that will be incorrect. So if you make order as a weak entity of discount, that will be incorrect. It's a good try. I think it's better to model the discount as like as associative entity in here, because discount depends on which order and also which amount, how much what is the quantity you ordered. Okay. And
Okay.
if you need a discount for just like order amount, so if you have reached a certain amount for the order, then you get a discount, then the discount should be in here. So the order, if the discount just depends on the order, then you can put a discount just right inside the order. You do not need a separate like weak entities for that. Does it make sense? So
Yeah.
just imagine you have order, right? Order have order ID, order date, and then order amount, and then you say you have another column say discount, how much discount was applied, right? So if that is the case, you order discount just depends on the amount, not depends on the amount of quantity you ordered. So there are many different kind of discounts, I understand. Okay, so the discount I put here will depends on the quantity you ordered. Okay. So for example, if I buy 10 computers, I'm gonna give you like a 5% discount. If you buy 100 computers, I'm gonna give you like a 15% discount, something like that, right? So that discount will be determined by the quantity here. Okay. Any other questions? All right. So if there's no other questions, I'm going to move on to say how we're going to convert this into relational model. Okay. So let me try to minimize this. Okay, and I'm going to remove that part. Okay. So the first thing we want to do is we are going to create one table for each box. Okay. So we're going to have a table called customers. Is this too thin, this line? Trying to make it like a second level. This one. Okay. Okay, so let's do it again. Customer. So there will be customers. So customers have a customer ID. That's ID. That's the primary key. So let's underline that. Okay. And then customer name, which is required. And then we're going to have orders. Okay, orders have order ID as a primary key, order date. Okay, order amount. And then just order discount. Let's say if I have put a discount in here. Okay, so this may be optional. The amount is optional too. Yeah, this is optional and this is required. Okay, and then we have component. So let's put a component in here. So components have part number as primary key, and then description as price, optional. Okay, so we handle that box, this one. Okay, and then we're going to have raw materials. Raw material, we're going to have two boxes, so I do both. Okay, so I'm going to do perishable ones first. Perishables, and the perishables have just expiration date, expire, that's optional. Yeah, that's optional. And then temperature, that's optional. And then the perishable does not have ID, so we need to make up one. So I'm going to make up that as what? Some kind of a perishable number, okay? Which is going to be artificial key for that. And then we are going to have the supertype. So that would be raw materials. Raw materials. Raw materials have a raw material ID and the description. Optional. That's it. Raw material ID. So in that case, the supertype already have an ID, so we're going to use the ID as a key. We do not need to make artificial key for that. Okay. And then we have workers. And then now after that, we need to do this associated ones too. Okay, so worker. Let me put workers in here. So workers have employee ID, employee name, and the job. Let's say this is optional. And what do we have here? Yeah, those are optional. So let's just say this is optional. Okay, and those optionality are not specified in the text, so you can make up anything that, as long as it's not contradicting to any statement, it should be okay. And then we have 4 associative ones. So we have order component, order raw materials. So let's do that. So let's put raw order materials here. And that basically have quantity at this point, just quantity, QTY. I think this is optional, right? It's optional, everything's optional, yeah. And then do the same thing for order components. Order components, and that also have a quantity, and the plus discount. So I'm just trying to use whatever I have in this diagram. Okay. So that's this one, okay? And then we have this one, it's called a comp line. Component made of other components. Quantity is also optional. So let me just put in here. Comp, okay? And the quantity is optional. And then finally we have component and raw materials. So that has quantity as a column also. Okay, so basically every box will have a table, so that so far is pretty straightforward. And now we need to handle this relationship, all the relationships. So the relationship we need to handle, first of all, we need to handle supertype, subtype. If there's a weak entities, we need to handle that next, okay? So let's do supertype, subtype first. So for first supertype, subtype, we are going to duplicate primary key of subtype tables into supertype. So in other words, we are going to put perishable number into raw materials. So this one will be duplicated here. So let's just say this is a perishable. So we can name that as perishable. The perishable ones, the perishable basically just like a perishable number here is artificial key, okay? But is linked to the perishables here. So if you have perishable ones, then you find out what is the temperature, what is the expiration date, and this is always optional. That is what I explained. So basically, not all raw materials are perishable ones, right? So some of them will have missing values here. Okay. So then we are done with supertype, subtype. Okay. And then we need to handle between customer and order. That's one to many. So that's easy one. So I'm going to duplicate primary key from customers into orders. So going to have customer ID here, customer or customer ID. And that, according to the picture, the receiving side is solid. So that means that it should be required. A foreign key is required. Okay. So that is duplicating from here to here. All right, so we handle that. And now let's handle this with this, what else? Let's handle this one next, okay? So between worker and the components, there's a one-to-many relationship. So we are going to duplicate the primary key from workers into component. From worker into components. So what is the worker's ID? That's the EID, okay? So I'm going to duplicate that EID into here. And let's just name that a foreign key as a worker. Okay, foreign key. Is that foreign key required or optional? Say, depending on this, the solid sign here, that means receiving side is solid, so that means the worker must be required. Okay, so we handle that. It is done. And the rest will be just all this associative entities, one-to-many, but then when you duplicate those foreign keys must be also part of a primary key. So let's do auto and a component one first. So then when you duplicate primary key of auto ID and product part number into here, into auto C. So where's auto C? Auto C is here, okay? So we have auto ID, one foreign key, which is always required because it's junction table. And then other one was component ID, there's a part number. So let's just say this is a part number here, and that's also required, okay? And also, these two must work together as one primary key for this table, okay? So that's a weak entity, right? So when you, another weak entity, there's associative entity because there's a little bar. So when you duplicate the primary key from autos into here, and you have to make auto ID, the foreign key as part of primary key for this associative entity. Do the same thing for these components. Okay. Now let's do the other one between auto and the raw materials. We also have to do something like that. So let's do that. So let's go to auto and the raw materials. So we have auto ID as a foreign key required, and then raw material ID also as a foreign key that's required, and then we have to make both of them as one primary key for that junction, for the associative entity table. Okay, and now let's handle the last two. Basically, we have component and a component one. Okay, so in this case, we are duplicating primary key of component twice inside this table. Okay, so component. So let's say comp, okay, and do it again. So of course this time we have to change the name. So let's say comp, maybe assembly. Let's just call this assembly, okay. Okay, just different name, but exactly the same kind of content. And then we need to make this as part of primary key too. And then finally we have this associative entity. So for that, we are going to duplicate primary key of component into there and the raw material ID into there too. So let's move this up. So let's say this component, that's for component ID, and then raw material ID. Both of them are required, and both of them will form the primary key for that. All right, so this is me just trying to see whether we can put everything into one view. Okay. Now, does anybody have questions on this part? So basically, this one is involving how to handle associative entities, how to handle supertype subtypes, and how to handle one-to-many, but there's no many-to-many relationship in anywhere. I think, yeah, no. Weak entity is pretty much handled as in the same way as like associative entity. Just make sure that primary key duplicated will be part of a primary key for the weak entity. Okay, and then if you have associative, if you have like a, if I just try to use one, let's just do it again. Suppose I have a like a recursive many-to-many relationship here instead of this using this surround, like what we originally have. Let's say we get rid of that one. Okay, so if I just have recursive relationship. Okay, this is a component. Okay, so that would be like that. Okay, so that would be many-to-many relationship here. So because of a many-to-many relationship, you are going to create a junction table for components. So component. So instead of this one, there was geometry, and instead of that, you are going to have just like a junction table instead. And the junction table will duplicate the primary key from components, which is component. I just make that as component, okay, or component ID, and that's a foreign key, and that foreign key is required because the junction table. And then other part will be also component, but then we have to change that name, so maybe we can call that as assembly too. Okay, assembly ID, assembly, and that is also foreign key. Basically, exactly the same thing. Component duplicated twice, but then they both will form composite primary key for the junction table. So if you look at the junction table in comparison to associative entity, the difference is that the associative entity has extra attributes, extra column, like quantity. Okay. Otherwise, this junction table should be exactly the same as that. You see that? This one, these two columns, they form a primary key for that junction table. Okay. And then you can also name that as a comp. Okay, so basically, junction table is associative entity is just kind of like a junction table in any way. Okay, just like a junction table with actual columns besides those foreign keys. All right, so then this is the relational model, which is the second part. And for third part, I am going to just create few tables, few SQL statements to see whether you have any questions. I'm not going to finish everything, and I will leave rest of time for you to ask questions about your review.
Professor?
Yeah.
Are the two primary keys, like for example in comp, are those not supposed to have one circle around them?
No, because there are two foreign keys. So basically you duplicate comp once and then duplicate comp another time. So you're not circle both of them. If you circle both of them, that means the original component has two columns as the primary key, and then you duplicate both in another place.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, so if there's no other questions, I'm going to just open up this SQL developer. I'm going to write a code inside there. Okay, let's do few tables. Okay. So let me see whether I can make a connections. You do need a password again. All right. Now, let's say, let me put this down here so that we can reference to the tables we need to create. Okay. So let's just say what tables we want to create. Okay, so let's say I want to create supertype, subtype first. Supertype, subtype, so that we include the raw materials and the perishables. Okay, so let's do that first, which is these two. Okay, so perishables and the raw materials. So we need to create perishables first because that has no foreign key, but raw materials table uses what is a perishable number as a foreign key. So we have to do without foreign keys first, the table without foreign keys first. So we could say create table, and then say raw materials, say parentheses, and then that table has raw material ID, raw M ID. Just make up some kind of say data type size let's just say the raw material ID is some kind of a 10 digits, 10 letters. Okay. And that is primary key, so not null is by default. Okay. And then we have a description. Description, I found that description is a keyword, so we have to use exactly, use a different name, like a description here. Description is also a keyword. Yeah, let me see, description. And then let's just say that is some kind of vocal 2. And let's just use 200 letters for that. And that is optional. Okay, and then parish. No, I'm sorry. I did the wrong one here. So we should do perishables first. Okay, so let's go back. So we'll come back to this one. So create table perishables. So it has a perishable number ID. So let's just say that's a char, maybe like a 5. Okay, that's ID. That's a primary key, and then we have expiration date. Expire date, and that expiration, okay, and that is data time. Okay, it's optional, so we can leave that by default. And temperature, and let's say temperature is some kind of a numeric, so I'm going to say that will be some kind of a 3,1, 2 decimal, 2 integer place, and 1 decimal place. Okay. And then we specify P number as a primary key, so that will be what? So constraint, constraint. Okay. And then we say PK, and then parish. Okay. And then primary key, and that primary key is P number as specified. Okay. Parentheses. Semicolon. So we'll finish that. Now we can do raw materials. So raw material will have one last column, which is perishable, which is a perishable number. So basically we have to use same data type size and the size as in the primary key. So let's say char 5. Okay. All right. So now we are ready to create a constraint. So constraint, and then say PK, then raw material, okay, and then say primary key. Okay, the primary key will be, in this case, will be RMID. And then do constraint again, constraint, FK, raw material, and then perishable, okay, then foreign key. Foreign key is perishable. And then say references, references perishables. References perishables. So the table, reference to this table. Okay. There we go. Semicolon, finish. Okay, so we finished the 2 tables, these 2. And now let's just try to create one more table, or maybe one table and one associative entity. So I'm going to do orders next. Okay, going to do order. Well, to create order, you have to have a customer. So which one we should do? Let's just do components. Can we do components? Components require worker, so we cannot have a shortcut, huh? So we have to just do. Let's do customers. Okay, customers. So create table customers, and the customer have customer ID. Let's just make out some kind of a data type for that. So that would be, says 9 digits customer ID number, customer number, this number. Okay, and then customer name. Let's just say that's a char and 45 characters, and I think that was required, right? So let me move this to the side here. Yeah, it requires customer name is required. Okay, so that will be not. I don't know. And then we're ready to create a cost constraint. Constraint PK, and say cost, and primary key, which is custom ID. There we go, finish. And then we can do orders. Create table, orders. Okay, and which has order ID, OID. So for that, I'm going to say it's a number, maybe 15 letters. And it's going to be not null by default because it's the primary key. And then we have order date, that's data time. I think data time is required. Yeah. And the amount discount will be not required. So this is not null. And the amount, which is number, let's just say that in this case, we're going to have 2 decimal places. We may use 5,2, okay? And it's optional. And then discount. Discount will typically is discount amount or discount rate. So let's just say that's discount amount. Okay, so if we have discount amount, then would be some kind of number here. And then there will be also, let's say, maybe 4,2 as a discount amount. Optional. And then finally, we have customer. That is optional. Is it optional? Required. Okay. So that basically just customer ID reproduced, duplicated. So we'll say customer here. And we should use number 9 for that. Number 9. And it's not null. Okay. And now we are ready to create primary key and the foreign keys. Constraint, PK, and then this ORD, and then say foreign key, or PR. No, this is orders, primary key. Primary key. So primary key is OID. And then we do foreign keys. Constraint, FK, ORD to customer. And say foreign key. And the foreign key is customer. So using the column that is currently used inside this table instead of custom ID. Custom ID was original primary key. Now after duplicating, the name has been changed to customer. So you have to use the name that is in the current table. So there's actually left parentheses actually. Okay. Foreign key. Let me spell that. Foreign key. Is it misspelled? Okay, let me say foreign key, customer, and then say references. References, customers. Okay, and there we go, semicolon. I think this is this for FK constraint? Okay, I think this is spelled here. Constraint, okay, right here. Constraint, name of constraint, and then foreign key, references to that. Okay, so foreign key was not misspelled. And now we are just do, let's say, one more subtypes, one more table. So we have orders, and now let's just do order raw material. Okay, do this table. This table. That's junction. That is essentially a junction table, but we made that as like a associative entity. So we create the raw order materials. Okay. Okay. So let's pull this aside, move this up. So we're creating this table. Okay. All right, so let's say create table. The junction is auto element, okay, parentheses. And the first we have quantity, and let's just say that quantity is typically raw material, right? So we can just say we have decimal places. So we use 3,1 as size and type, and also it's optional. So by default it's optional. And then we have order ID, and that order ID should match this one, so number 15. Okay, and that is required, so not null. Okay, but it's going to be primary key, right? Part of primary key, so we don't have to have that. And then row M ID, and that should match raw materials ID. So this one, so char 10, okay? Raw materials ID, so char 10. Okay, that is also not null. All right, and I think that's it. That's all the columns. So now we can just create constraint for primary key. So that would be PK, and then say auto mn, say primary key. Primary key will be auto ID, comma, and RM ID. So both columns form primary key. Finally, we have two constraints for foreign keys. FK is auto mn, reference to auto. Okay, and then foreign key, that is auto ID, references autos. Constraint FK auto mn, and then this one reference to the raw material, and then foreign key, and then this is RMID. The second, this one's foreign key, and then references, and then there will be raw materials. So how was it named? Yeah, raw materials. So reference to this table. Okay. There we go. So semicolon. So that we basically did all kinds of tables. So we just need, the components, workers, component, and auto component raw have not been finished. So otherwise, this is complete implementation. Okay. Now I'm going to stop here, say whether you have any questions. No questions? Okay, if there's no questions, we have, I think, how much time we have? We have a few minutes left, sorry. Just like about 10 minutes left. So let's see whether you have any questions about your review questions. So let me take a look at your review questions.
I have a quick question, Professor.
Yeah.
So outside of the past quizzes for the multiple choice, what other what else should we study to prepare for the multiple choice?
What else should I study for that? So did you go over the review list, review questions? So let me check that first. Okay, so you study for homework questions first, okay? Both hands-on and quiz questions. And then study review questions. Let me just take a look at review questions. I think the review questions has quite a few questions, just like sample questions that it's kind of like multiple choice questions. Let me take a look here. So this is review question, okay? So basically list the basic concepts. So for each one of them, you should be able to define it, okay? Should be able to tell, so what is a foreign key? Is a key from another country? No. Okay, that was actually a student answer. Basically, a foreign key is just a duplicated primary key, right? So what is the relational model? And what is network model? So those concepts should be clear, right? And the skills here listed should be the ones that you can do it. So basically hands-on questions that should be based on those. And then have a sample question here. So what is logical data model? Give 3 examples. Give an example of relational model. What is the primary key? What is the foreign key? So all those will be type of questions that can, of course, the multiple choice questions can ask. Okay. And why should the recursive relationship is always optional to optional? And then has anybody thought about that? And there's a star here. The star here, that means those questions you don't need to do it. You don't need to don't need to study it, because those are the questions we did not handle. We did not do it in this semester. So those are like exclusive relationship or multi-way relationships. We did not do that in this semester. And what is multi-valued attributes and how to handle that? Okay. And so all those are typical multiple choice questions. And then other source of multiple choice questions, it will be, so if you look at the end of chapters, I give you like how many chapters, 4 or 5 chapters already, right? So look at the end of chapters, they should have like a review questions, and those review questions will typically give you some kind of study materials on how to prepare for multiple choice questions. Okay, so this is what I would suggest you to do. Okay, so first of all, you go over your homework questions, and then you go over your lecture notes. So make sure if your lecture notes, if you say there are certain part you don't understand, and then make sure you try and understand. So all the lecture notes, that PowerPoint, all that. So all those, anything inside of those, of course, I can create a multiple choice questions. Okay, and then trying to do one of these ER diagram questions, and then do one of these converting to ERD questions, right? So let's say, suppose you're going to do this one, right? So here you're going to create a table for patients, insured, and covered, and then have a table for claim, and then for, what is this, clinic? All right, so you're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tables to begin with. And then you need to have the weak entities in here, because this is a weak entity, right? So basically, insured ID will duplicate inside the covered as part of a primary key for covered here, right? And then you handle this what I call supertype subtype next, right? So going to create a table for that, make sure that has ID. And in this case, it's both subtypes have IDs. So basically, you're going to just use that IDs as a primary keys. If the subtype does not have ID, then you have to make up artificial key. And then you duplicate the primary key from this covered and insured into patients. So notice here, the insured has 2 columns as a primary key. Covered also have 2 columns as a primary key. Remember this, covered is going to have 3 columns. Okay, so you have this what is called is it NIO or NO? That's part of the number, that's part of a primary key, and then you're going to duplicate the primary key from insured into here, right? So for that, you're going to duplicate both member number and the group number into here. Make sense? So then the covered is going to have 3 columns as a primary key. Okay, insured has 2 columns as a primary key. Okay, and then you duplicate primary key from insured into patient, so 2 columns in there, and then duplicate primary key of covered into the patient, 3 columns will be duplicated. So eventually, patient is going to have these 3 columns plus 2 columns from insured and plus 3 columns from covered as foreign keys. Okay, and then the rest will be easy to handle. Okay, now suppose you go to the last question. Say here we have recursive many-to-many relationship. So you create a junction table, right, for that many-to-many between airlines. So you're going to duplicate our airline name twice inside the junction table. Of course, you need to change one of the name. Okay, maybe one is airline and one is called Partner, something like that, right? And the same thing here. Okay, and here you have like a weak entity here, right? So airlines and the flight is a weak entity. So you're going to duplicate primary key from airlines into flight as part of primary key for flight. Okay, so the primary key for flight is going to have like airline name and also flight number, those part as one primary key. And then we duplicate that into this junction table, into this associative entity. Then make sure you have to duplicate both airline name and the flight number both into this table. Another part will be airport. Airport code will be coming to here also. So then this table is going to have the person table is going to have 2 foreign keys. One is AP airport code. Another one is flight primary key for flights, which is consists of airline name and also flight number, both columns as one foreign key duplicated inside here. Okay, so just trying to do do this one of these questions, and then trying to do one of these entity relationship diagram questions. Okay. Let me see. And then you also have to have a write SQL statement. Maybe this one you can just do example here. So this you're already given a table. The table is already given. Okay. So you just need to write a SQL statement to create those tables. So there's no need for conversion, anything. So if I already give you a relational model like this, okay, the primary key, foreign key is already indicated here. So you just need to write a SQL statement to create these tables. You do not have to duplicate the primary key or do something like a conversions because there's nothing to convert anymore. This is already a relational model. Is that clear? So here the following is a relational model, right? Using data
Professor.
model. Yeah.
Could you just pull up the answers for the multiple choice really quick?
You mean for homework, today's homework?
Yeah.
Okay, so I can do that. Let me move this. So that would be homework 4 here. Okay, so which question? Which question you have problem?
Oh, I just wanted to see the answers really quick.
Answers for what? You should be able to say answers when you review it.
Oh, okay. Never mind.
You can just go to review and then you see which questions you selected right, which ones are incorrect. I thought you have questions about any answers. All right. Do you have any other questions you may have? No more questions? Okay, let me stop recording.